Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills. We are so delighted and so very honored that you'll join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids, teachers, principals, and librarians. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Himalaya, Ghana, Podcast Addict, Good Pod, wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from not too far from our studios in Reedville in beautiful Massachusetts. Our guest is here today to celebrate her book. It's called Who Will Accompany You? My Mother-Daughter Journey, Far from Home and Close to the Heart. Please welcome to the show, Meg Stafford. Hey, Meg, how are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you, Jed?
I'm really excited. Meg was a friend of mine who also has a podcast, and I've been on his podcast, reached out to me and said, oh, you have to have Meg on your show. She is amazing. And then when I heard that she is here in the Boston area, I said, absolutely, let's get going. And so she's here, and I can't wait for you to tell us all about Who Will Accompany You.
So, it started when my younger daughter and I took a trip to Nepal and Bhutan. She was 17 and she was working on her senior project for high school. And the way they do it there, it's a charter school, and they answer a broad question, and hers was, what is happiness? And she decided that she wanted to study meditation in Buddhism at a monastery in Nepal called Kopan. And so she had just turned 17, and we did not feel comfortable popping her on a plane and sending her around halfway around the world. So we decided that I would go with her, and I would trek to the Annapurna base camp while she studied meditation and Buddhism at Kopan. So that's what happened. And a friend of mine happened to be living in Hong Kong at the time, and I said, hey, how would you like to trek with me to Annapurna base camp? And she said, well, it would have to be between these dates, which worked out exactly right. So we spent about 10 days on the trek. Kate was at Kopan for 12 days, and then we went to Bhutan for 3 days. And it felt like, although she was literally sitting and meditating, my first title of the book was Sitting on Top of the World, because I felt like I was sitting up high in the mountains there. And although I was trekking and she was sitting, both were very meditative. Mm-hmm. And we were early in the trekking season at the end of February. And so there were not many people on the trail. So I thought it'd be interesting to go back and forth between her voice, what it was like for her at 17 to be on the other side of the world by herself, very difficult to get in touch with anyone, and what my experience was like, both trekking and being not available very easily, and what the whole experience was like culturally. So that's the first part of the book. And the second part of the book is when my older daughter, when she was 23, lived in Colombia, the northwestern corner of Colombia, as an observer witness. And this was very scary to me as a mom, because she was literally walking with people from the peace community from one place to another, who were specifically not aligned with the military, the paramilitary, or the guerrillas, but none of those three groups trusted that. So they were all literally at risk going from one place to another. So their group would accompany them and wear bright blue t-shirts, not too dissimilar from your background there. And they were in touch with the UN and other international groups. So if anything happened, it would become an international incident. So I went down to visit her there, and where she lived was a 45-minute open air Jeep ride and an hour and a half hike to where she was living. So it was really remote. But I had a wonderful experience there, and it was helpful to have feet on the ground and see what she was actually doing. And then the last section is about home and what was this like in my marriage? How did we all come to be such travelers, and sort of ties things together.
You know, we've celebrated traveling, and we love inspiring kids to travel. Not so much to the northwest corner of Colombia to be a witness and possibly become part of an international incident. And I know people listening about the story about your younger daughter are probably thinking to themselves, there's nowhere to meditate in Boston. But
oh, there it, or much closer.
But
her school actually encourages kids to go off campus for a few weeks if they want to. So she was taking full advantage.
I guess. Yeah. You know, we had an experience, my beautiful wife and I, a few years ago. She wanted to travel, and I said, where do you want to go? And she literally spun the globe in her classroom and like this, and her finger landed in Panama. And she goes, let's go to Panama. And I said, sure. And everybody was like, why are you going to Panama? And like, we spun the globe, and and it was great. We had an amazing time. The nation of Panama is beautiful. I encourage folks to visit it. The canal is amazing. The people are wonderful. Yours was, your kids were much more thoughtful in where they were going, but still, talk about going to the unknown. Where do you think your kids got that spirit from?
Well, I have to confess to having some of it. They took it a step further, but I have always loved to travel and spent a semester abroad. And when I was in college, traveled across the states by myself by bus after college, and then traveled up the coast of California and lived in San Francisco for a year. And so we didn't do a ton of traveling with them, but certainly I understand the impulse. I wanted to go to Greece when I was 16 with my friends. My parents wouldn't let me. I was very annoyed about that, but I certainly understand the pull and still do. And actually, Gail, my older daughter, met me in Lithuania this summer. She was visiting a friend in Paris, and then a friend who was working in Turkey, and then met me in Lithuania, where we were for a week attending a music festival where I was writing about that. So it's still there. Kate went on to attend university at Edinburgh in Scotland. So the trip to Nepal was really important in terms of her appreciating that she needed to take time off before going to college. And she went to South Africa, where we visited her. She met a friend there, and they traveled around Europe, starting in Edinburgh. And she decided that instead of going to Connecticut College, where she had been accepted already, she wanted to take time and apply to schools in Scotland. So she took another year off and had to take subject tests and lived in New Zealand for several months. So it's before she was accepted, and then lived in Scotland for 4 years. So.
Wow. I'm not quite understanding how New Zealand helps you get into university in Scotland, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah, nothing. It was just she had to take the SAT subject test, which she hadn't. So while she was applying and waiting to get accepted, she took another year off of another year waiting to be accepted, and just traveled and lived and worked in New Zealand for 6 months while she was waiting to hear back from University of Edinburgh, where she was accepted and eventually went.
I'm curious how much. Let's see if I can find the English words to put this together. how much better do you think your daughter's experience in college was because she took the time to live a little bit, to be more independent, and also took more time to discern what it was that she really wanted to get out of university?
It's an interesting question because she said that she wanted to go to a school in Scotland because it was more centrally located. And we laughed because, like, central to what?
Yes.
But in fact, every semester she went to some European country, either for ultimate frisbee, which she started playing in college and continues to play now. She's 28. Or one of her friends was, I think, is Romania. They went there and visited, or they knew someone in Portugal. They went there for a few days. So it did get her to visit a lot more countries, which is so much easier from there. Mm-hmm. The university itself, having 2 years out from high school, she definitely approached it in a different way. But it was very different from her very small high school, which was extremely personal mm-hmm. and very small classes. And all of a sudden she was in very large classes, mostly lecture, where she was used to a very participatory kind of high school. Mm-hmm. So the academics were challenging in terms of how they were presented. But she loved Edinburgh. She loved being there. She's still very much in contact with the friends that she made from there. In fact, some came to visit recently, that we had met when we visited her there. So it was fun to see them again. So it was, it was an interesting time for her.
I bet. I also love traveling as somebody who's made a living as a professional magician doing educational magic shows at schools. I've had the opportunity to travel throughout the United States and Puerto Rico, and yes, and that's one thing about, Americans get a bad rap because so many of us don't travel outside of the country and don't even have passports. But the reality is, we hosted international kids in our home, and we had one of a medical student from Italy come out on tour with my daughter and I for 3 weeks, and we went from Boston down to Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, over the course of 3 weeks. And she said, in Europe, we would have been through 15 countries already.
That's right. Absolutely. It's true.
So, we do, if you're traveling here in the United States, you are traveling and you're visiting different cultures. And, but I think I love it. I went on as a 19-year-old. I got on my bicycle and went up to the maritime provinces of Canada and rode around the islands by myself for a month.
Wow.
And it was a fantastic time. It boggles my wife's mind when she thinks about that. My daughter right now has done a lot of travel through Europe. My beautiful wife and I have been exploring Central America. I'm headed down to El Salvador in a few weeks. Traveling is just, I love it. Can you talk a little bit about why you think travel is so important?
Few different reasons. I mean, I love it, and I love to see new places and meet new people, experience new things. It just, I can't get enough of it. I just find it endlessly fascinating and enriching. And it also, I find that I'm the most open, or one of the times that I'm the most open is when I'm traveling and things are new, and it is really easy to be present and in the moment because you have to figure out where you're going, or you're meeting new people, or you're seeing breathtaking things or difficult things or unusual things, but it expands our minds and hearts, and it really connects us to other people to see how other people live, what's important to them, what kind of landscape they live in, what kind of climate they live in, what kind of foods they eat, and what things are similar, what things are different.
Mm-hmm.
But you really see the connection of all of us the more you travel.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to make the world smaller in the positive sense.
Yeah. I love that idea of being mindful. One of the things that I think is when you are traveling, you're more vulnerable. You're dependent on others. You're dependent on the kindness of others. And even just in asking for directions. My beautiful wife and I got lost at night in Costa Rica, and when we asked for directions, the first response was, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. It's really dangerous." and so we had to rely on the kindness of a cab driver to take us back to the hotel. But that's part of I think just feeling human is being vulnerable and getting in touch with that part of yourself. I think it's a really healthy thing. But I'm just a dope. You're a social worker. You have like book knowledge about that and how valuable that can be.
Well, and it's both. I mean, anyone can experience mindfulness and being present, and it's a wonderful thing to do with our children, with the people who we enjoy being with, because having those experiences together is connecting in and of itself. So it's an amazing thing to be in another place and to not know things, as you're saying, to not know where to find certain things, but you learn that you can figure it out, and that builds a lot of confidence for kids. And I think it was a really pivotal experience for Kate at 17 to be so far from home and to realize, not know a soul there, but to learn that she could meet people and she could get to know people and she could make her way and that she would be okay.
Yeah.
And she loved, there were people there on the course from all over the world. I know Switzerland, it's Australia, India, just all over the place. So that was really eye-opening and important for her.
One of the things that you and I were chatting about before we started recording was that you think that this is a really valuable book for high school kids to read with their parents, so to co-read and then talk about some of the benefits you think families sitting down and reading Who Will Accompany You together would be.
I think it opens up the conversation about where both parents and kids want to go. Are there places that they'd like to go together? What needs to happen in order to make it possible to go to some of those places? It fires up the imagination and just opens up a rich dialogue about what it might be like to go to the Grand Canyon together. Or it doesn't have to be so far flung. It can be a really interesting thing to go to your neighborhood park, or to go to Blue Hills for the first time, or to Long Island, or any place that is accessible, whether, it's Maine or California or some place that you can drive to. It doesn't have to be around the world, but exposing ourselves to new things is really healthy and helps us all to grow. And conversations between parents and children, like, how do you stay connected when you're far away? These days it is so easy with cell phones and computers, and it's really easy to be in touch with one another. And also, there were times with both of our kids when they were in places where we couldn't reach them. And that was really challenging. But that's the way it was when I traveled. Mm-hmm. When I was abroad, I didn't speak to anyone from home for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And we relied on aerograms that took, it was 3 weeks by the time you'd get a response. but you learn that you can maintain that cord, through that time, even though you're far away. And that's a really important thing to learn and to remember.
Yeah. I also think, who will accompany you? That idea that, as our kids leave, we're still going to be accompanying them, even if they're going on their own. The lessons that we have taught them and the love that we've given them and the confidence that we've hopefully helped them build will be with them. And that can kind of help us kind of relax a little bit and stop biting our fingernails while they're traveling, whether it's to Nepal or to South Boston.
And what we learn from them, we take that also. And that's one of the fun things. When I went back to Copan with Kate, she was more used to negotiating for like cab fares or buying goods in the market. And so I was counting on her at that point, and she was capable. And when I was in Colombia with Gail, she's fluent in Spanish. I know a little, but I counted on her to translate for me and to guide us where we were going, because she knew more than I did. So it turns things around a little bit.
Yeah, I love that too, when we have a chance to learn from our kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which happens all the time. If we're in a new city together, I might have an idea about what kind of restaurant I want to try, but they might have other ideas, and great. So interesting to hear what is intriguing to them. Yeah. Or when we were in Lithuania, Gail had arrived a little bit before me, and she had scoped out the city, and she helped. She was tremendous in navigating around there and finding the Illusion Museum, which I might not have thought about, which you would have loved.
I'm sure.
Be right up your alley.
I'm absolutely sure. Hey, I'm curious, where's the one place that you really want to visit and travel to next, but you haven't had an opportunity to get there yet?
We actually are planning to go to New Zealand at the end of January, and I'm very excited about that. So that's been on both my husband and my bucket list for many years, and it's not a place you can just pop off to for the weekend. So I'm very excited about that. And we're also talking about potentially taking a bike trip in Denmark next summer. So there's so many places I still want to go. I've not been to Costa Rica, we have friends who live in Honduras, actually. And one of them grew up in Panama. You mentioned Panama before. So the husband and wife, she spent many years in Panama. He spent some time in Jamaica, and they both love it there. And they've been in Utila for many years. So
wonderful.
Yeah, it's fun.
We love Central America a whole lot, and I hope you have a great time in New Zealand and in Denmark and wherever else you go. Right now, we need to tell everybody where they can travel to find out more about you and find out more about who will accompany you.
They can make their way to my website, which is www.megstafford.com. or www.whowillaccompany.you.com. So those are the two websites. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, Meg Stafford 2183. So
wonderful.
I post some things there, and on my blog there are lots of articles about. There's one about the bike trip we took this summer from Buffalo to Albany, and there's lots about Lithuania and other places.
Wonderful. Well, we've had a great time speaking to the author of Who Will Accompany You? My Mother-Daughter Journey, Far From Home and Close to the Heart. Our guest has been Meg Stafford. Hey, Meg, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading With Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.